Welcome to This Team is Killing Us, a podcast about what the Carolina Panthers do to good people. She is Lauren Brownlow. I am Demetri Ravanos. And Lauren, what is killing me today is the anticipation. We are days away from the start of a new season, and our new coach calls himself an optimist bully. I want to get on the optimism train. We will get into this a little bit more later on. But I'm just not there yet.
See, okay, he's handsome enough to get away with that quote with me personally, but usually...
And to be fair, he did not start calling himself this. This is what Baker Mayfield started calling him last year, and he adopted it.
Okay, I kind of like that then, because like there does show a degree of like a self-awareness there of like, hey, you know, I'm kind of this person, because most optimist bullies do not know they are that.
Right.
So I do respect that, because they'll be like, oh, it's all going to be great. It's great. Everything's great. You should just keep your head up all the time. And I'm like, can I just be like sad for a minute? Like, for God's sake.
So I'm totally with you on just day to day, right? Like my mom is something of an optimist bully. And there are times when I tell her, like, it is okay to admit when shitty things are shitty, right? Like that doesn't make you a moper. I want to know how that translates to a coaching job.
Yeah.
Like I've never, I cannot think of a coach, and I don't mean like I can't think of a successful coach. I cannot think of any coach that comes in with the attitude that it will all work out.
I mean, look, I think that my guess is, because like for the most part, quotes I've seen from him seem to show a decent amount of realism, you know? And so I think it's more of like a long-term, that's the way I take it, is more of a long-term optimism. Or at the very least, if you have that kind of mentality, it's very much a like, this is what we have to do to get to here.
Yeah.
Like, this is how we need to play. And if we can do those things, then it will work out. If we don't do those things, then it's not going to, and we're going to have to fix it until we do. And that kind of optimism I can somewhat get behind. Although, I mean, look, I do want the realism to continue to sort of temper things on his end, because I feel like it's hard to know what your team is capable of and not if you don't have a realistic, you know, view of what they are. But it won't take long, I feel like, to get that realistic view of what they can and can't do.
So I want to believe and be on board with everything you're saying. This is maybe it's my own hang up, but he talked about in this article with The Athletic that part of this optimist bully persona, I guess, was born out of telling his wife that he had been unfaithful to her years ago when they were at some marriage retreat, and she told him that she knew and that they were going to work through it, and now they are much stronger. And that's great for the two of them. It really is. Like I'm happy that they found a place that the two of them can be happy.
Right.
I, again, wonder how that translates into football, though, because...
I guess there's the parallel of, like, him personally being in, like, the depths at a low point, personally. And, like, I'm sure he probably was wondering if things were going to work out in general. Like, not just for, like, his marriage, but, like, his...
100%. And he talks about this, right? That to a certain extent, he understood that the plan was not his. You know, he's a man of faith. So he said, the plan is God's, and all I can do is just play my role in it, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That's not football. In football, you can out-scheme whoever's plan it is.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm not going to worry about that part too much until they trot something out there that looks like last year.
Yeah.
Because if you had told me that was like Frank Reich's philosophy, I would have been like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Well, there you go.
Now I understand why they're doing these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think it has to mean that he's applying it strictly in that way. I think it's just something that probably informs his personal philosophy more than anything else, because I think he's a smart enough guy to know that, like, you do have to do some stuff because you can't just take Baker Mayfield and go, well, I believe, and then he's going to work out. You know what I mean? So clearly he has, like, done some things in the past, not just like hoping that it's going to work out because of, like, what if God hates DaveTepper? We don't know that.
I mean, all sides point to God is at the very least on the fence. Like he may not straight up hate him, but
listen, okay, I want to be clear about something. This is very much a joke, because all kinds of awful people thrive every
Of
single
course.
day in this world. So we are, I'm not like, I don't think Demetri is suggesting either that like, oh, if DaveTepper does poorly in any facet of his
Right.
life, that's the Lord's doing. Why did Jerry Jones get Super Bowls? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There are others, but he's the one that came immediately to
Why
mind.
do you think that faith-based approach works so well for coaches, particularly in this sport? Is it a matter of having to believe that you're going to be okay, that all these guys sort of deal with when you get into a sport this violent? I mean,
I do think it helps connect to players
Mhm.
as well. I think it's somewhat of a way that I think older coaches bridge a bit of a gap.
sure.
You see that, people make fun of Dabo, and I get it, but like Dabo Swinney at Clemson, like
Mhm.
I think there are players who very much connect to that message and feel like Dabo is somebody that they can relate to on that level and
Yeah.
have conversations about those things, like meaningful conversations about things like that. And if they feel like if their coach is this type of guy, that they can like buy in more and whatever and relate to him more. So I think that that's part of it. And yeah, maybe there is that piece of it of like, or there's the piece of it too of like the PEACE of knowing that like whatever happens, like we're just going to go forward, make the best of it, keep trying. I mean, this is such coach speak, but like keep trying to get better because
Yeah.
that is the thing you have to do. If we lose, okay. If we win, great.
I mean,
what
there definitely are parallels, right? We're
For
going to do
sure.
the best we can and try to get better. Certainly sounds like something that you would hear at an evangelical church.
And I don't know that, but I also, well, whatever. I'm not gonna say anything. But I don't know that like even Dave Canales would necessarily say that like the Panthers winning and losing games is like the purview of the Lord.
No, I
You know
don't
what I
think so
mean?
either. And this is what I think the difference is with someone like Canales versus, like, I've talked about this with you before. Like,
He's a more modern type of that faith.
but here's the other thing
Maybe.
too. Like, I've talked about this with you before, covering Dabo down in South Carolina. I've talked to him a couple of times, and I find him very goofy and very
course.
exhausting, but very genuine.
Oh,
right?
yes, 100. Like he is.
There
that,
is
he
no
is
doubt
that,
in my mind he
that
believes
nerd.
every word that comes out of his mouth.
Not not that religion makes you nerd. He just is that nerdy,
No,
like,
I mean,
whatever
yeah,
kind of like
Okay, but all right. So let me use this
very
as the
like
counterpoint.
two old youth minister vibes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good one.
Like,
The counterpoint to Dabo and to Canales,
Yeah.
would be someone like Urban Meyer, someone like Hugh Freeze.
100%.
The rub a little Jesus on it,
charlatan,
and it
right.
gets, yes, the charlatan.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to say
The
it.
hucksters.
I wrote it down here as real deal versus hucksters. Like, I think that between Canales not being significantly older than a lot of his players, the fact that even though he doesn't wear it on his sleeve the way like a Tim Tebow did, or certainly other players as well, like BryceYoung thinks and talks this way
Yes,
too.
100%.
Like, there is
and I'm
certainly,
sure like the majority of the roster, I would assume,
I
probably
think-
does as well.
I think that if people can tell being in front of you that you are genuine in your convictions,
Yes.
whether they agree with you or not, they are at least going to respect you.
And I think that's true, like across no matter what faith anyone on the roster is. And
Yeah.
it's not just about his faith. I think that's the vibe he seems to give off
Sure.
in general, is like, you're like, is this guy for real? And you kind of listen to him and you're like, seems like it.
Yeah.
Seems like he kind of is.
And another like good example, I think, of Canales coming off as a very genuine guy. This is a sort of clunky transition into the next topic, but the way he has talked about Ickey ever since he got the job, like, there is some real acknowledgement of Ickey had problems last year, and there is
Yes,
also
that's
some
what I
real
mean, yeah.
acknowledgement from Dave Canales that I have a system that is going to take a lot off his plate. Whether or not it makes him better is not the conversation.
Right.
It's, does this guy have to do everything? ESPN called Ickey the X factor on this team, and it was really interesting. Ben Solak, who wrote the article, used Andrew Thomas, played at Miami, now is a member of the New York Giants, as sort of the best case scenario.
Mhm.
His rookie year was awful. His rookie year, we were wondering if Andrew Thomas belonged in the NFL, and he is now turned into one of the better tackles in the league.
I think my biggest concern with Ickey was that it wasn't like that.
Yeah, agreed.
His rookie year was, I mean, I wouldn't say it was like amazing, but it was pretty good. Like, I was pretty happy with it.
There was reason to think that it was time to draft the franchise quarterback because you had that position set.
Yes.
I think that the reason I think Andrew Thomas is a really good comparison is because, whether or not the guy had a good rookie season, like Ickey had a full-on reset with a brand new coaching staff.
Yes.
And now he's done it twice.
And maybe there is something to that notion of like, maybe he did have too much on his plate, and maybe that was contributing to, because it was so puzzling to us. I mean, literally we joked, to be clear, or I did. I don't know. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you thought I was going too far when I said this, but like, is he shaving points? Maybe that was just in our private text messages.
I mean, look,
I was, is he okay?
As I was looking up and sort of doing some extra, making sure I had, I don't know, like anecdotes and stuff to share on this thing. I looked back at the episode of the midweek talk through I did with Ross Tucker, where we talked about Ickey Ekwonu. And I said at that point, there are times it looks like he does not know what he's supposed to be doing. And Ross, who played all 5 positions across the offensive line in the NFL, said that he can tell from the second the ball is snapped, Ickey has forgotten what to do with his feet. And he said that doesn't just happen. That is that's a lot of overcoaching going on. Yeah, and I think that makes sense, actually. And so, like, to me, I think Canales is the perfect guy for somebody like Ickey, because he can just kind of, he can help give him back that belief in himself. And I will say this, like, look, we only saw them for one series, granted, but it was really nice to see like Ickey making a difference in a positive way on a drive. Like, I feel like we hadn't seen that in so long. If anything, we either didn't notice Ickey or we would notice him negatively and be like, literally, what are you doing right now? Yeah, it was interesting as I was getting ready. I love Ickey. I want him to be good. Agreed. And I really get excited when you see stuff like yesterday when I was doing some research, putting the rundown together. Ran across some videos of those joint scrimmages they did with the Jets. And like, you see what all the Jets players and coaches were talking about. He looked excellent. Now, it's worth noting, even coming out of college, I mean, if there was a knock on him, I guess it was that he was a better run blocker than he was a pass blocker. But at the same time, like, he does still have the physical tools to be able to play that position at least well enough for this team to be successful. Yeah, and this is something that Dave Canales talked about, like from the moment he took over, that this offense is friendly to tackles because A, the quarterback's supposed to get the ball out really fast, but B, this is built on a lot of bootlegs and they are dedicated to the run. And Canales didn't really go into depth in explaining his point of view on this. And maybe as somebody that has covered football for as long as you have, you can explain it, but better than I can. I mean, Dave Canales really truly believes that being dedicated to the run game is good for tackles. I mean, I could see that for sure. I think it definitely, I mean, obviously it's great for Ickey, especially too, because that's his forte and can kind of, and that's a good thing to have. Now, when teams know you can't pass, it is a problem. Right. And so if you can establish the fact that you can run, that's why all these teams work so hard early in games to establish the run, because then it opens up everything in the pass game. But if teams know that you can't pass, they're just going to crowd the line and whatever. But if you can, get your quarterback moving on like rollouts, get the ball out quickly, it becomes that much more difficult for teams to sort of, disrupt what you're doing defensively. And it becomes easier for you we were screaming for this last year. Yeah. Were we not? Like, we were literally like, please, for the love, your O-line is not. Now, I know that this is part of Canales' offensive philosophy in general anyway, but at the same time, like, it certainly works out well for a roster like this one, where I know the offensive line is better and you can certainly see that it is better. Yeah. But how much better, how well can they hold up against some of the better defensive lines in the league? It remains to be seen. But at least if you're doing things this way, it maximizes your chances for success instead of just like having these long developing downfield routes where it's like, why? No one's going to have, no one can get open on this roster last year. That was our thing. And then B, like, you don't have time for this, literally. Yeah. And look, this is where, okay, admittedly, last year, the 2023 preseason was very different than the 2024 preseason in the way the Panthers approached it, right? So take whatever you want from this, but Ickey looked lost from the get-go. Yes. Last year. Even in preseason, we said it. That's right. Yeah. I mean, like, it was that Giants game was a preseason game where he just let I was Thibodeau just right through to Bryce without touching it. Yeah. So I do hope that this confidence carries over and makes a meaningful difference. I do think it is important to point out we are talking about a guy that gave up pressure, whether it's a hurry or a sack, on 33% of the snaps he was in for last year. That is astounding. I hope a new coaching staff and a new offensive system is enough to turn that around, but that is a big, big number.
I saw in the notes, but I still, just hearing it out loud is like, that's
it hurts, right?
It's bleak. It's a bleak stat, Demetri. It just is. And for him too. And look, these are human beings. Sure. I know they're professionals and paid a lot of money and whatever, although offensive linemen aren't paid nearly as much as some of the others. So whatever. And I love my linemen across the board. I love offensive and defensive linemen. I do adore them. But psychologically, we even said this last year, because he had not been like that the year before, we were almost wondering if he had a little bit of the yips, you know? And so that part does make me feel at least a little bit better, right? Of okay, we know what he's capable of, or what he showed at least it seemed to show he was capable of. As long as he can get right, up here, he should be okay. And so I really hope that's the case for him, because look, it's usually a bad thing if you're an offensive lineman and people know who you are. Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. Which sucks. Agreed. It sucks, but it's true.
Yeah.
And a lot, that was the only offensive lineman people were talking about last year. And you can see why with that stat.
Yeah. 100%. Speaking of get your brain right, let's make sure you understand what the flow is going to be like of this show this season. If you're hearing this the day it comes out, it is a Thursday. That is going to be normal. The Thursday show is going to be the big show. It is going to be where we talk about what is coming up for the team. If you want everything we do, you need to sign up for OG fans, because Lauren's recap article is going to go out every single Monday morning. I will do a short recap video, a short opinion kind of video after each game on Sunday that will go up on the OG Triangle Media, all of the social feeds, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all of it. But Lauren is going to have the more in-depth analysis, or I guess look at the game.
I was like, well, yeah, depends.
Every Monday, and you only get that by signing up for OG fans. You can do that at ogtrianglemedia.com. If you want to pay the $200, you get the entire year and the gifts as part of the Founders Club. You've got to do that before the end of this month. Otherwise, $13 a month. And if you pay for a whole year up front, we will give you 1 month for free. Lauren, you and I have a little bit of a disagreement regarding College Game Day this week. NickSaban talking to former Duke coach, brand new Texas A&M coach Mike Elko, who, by the way, dressed like he was getting ready to be visited by the ghost of Christmas past before that game.
Well, that's Mike for you, though. Yeah. He's not going to give a shit just because he's at a new school and they paid him whatever amount of money.
Yeah,
he's going to be comfortable, and I respect that.
No, I do too. He came out, for people that didn't see, khaki pants as is standard issue for any coach. I would call it a nightgown.
Man, you know what? Maybe he just wanted to, after the game, I'm assuming, maybe not take his pants off.
Why not?
Go straight to bed.
Look, as much like Mike Elko, as a big boy, I don't want to wear pants if I'm not absolutely enforced to.
I don't wear pants. Sure. I wear sweatpants very often.
I saw someone Photoshop the Sleepy Time T-Bear face over Mike Elko.
Yeah, I saw the hat, the kerchief, or whatever you want to call it, the nightcap. Yeah. I guess it's a kerchief. Just I only know that from whatever that Christmas poem.
Twas the Night Before Christmas.
Thank you. God.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, the war on Christmas is real in the Brownlow house.
Yeah. No, obviously. I hate Christmas.
All right, so just to recap, NickSaban, now analyst on College Game Day. Last year was the head coach at the University of Alabama. Spent the previous 16 seasons before that as well as the head coach at the University of Alabama, which means BryceYoung was his quarterback. The last time Alabama lost a game at Texas A&M, Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Game day was at Texas A&M last week. Elko was on the set, and NickSaban paid him a compliment. And Lauren Brownlow and I have a bit of a difference of opinion on the way this went down. I'm going to play you the audio first.
The last time we played here at night, which was 3 years ago, you all beat us. And BryceYoung, after winning 19 games in a row, BryceYoung was so confused by your pressure that we had no chance.
Yeah.
But you did a great job that night.
I'm going to take that one and run, Coach.
All right. So the last time they played, it was the defense that Mike Elko schemed up that had Bryce Young so confused that the team lost for the first time in 20 games. Lauren, give me the case for this is throwing Bryce Young under the bus, because I disagree to an extent.
Okay. Hearing it, I understand why he did not feel, I'm sure he did not think in the moment that was what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
However, and I don't think intentionally he went out to be like, let me go crap all over Bryce Young.
Sure.
My issue is far more of Bryce does not need this right now. Okay. Like, I get you're trying to pay a compliment to Mike Elko. I get that you're right. Like, and by the way, Mike Elko did that to lots of people throughout his career. He's one of the best defensive minds in college football, if not the best, really.
Sure. Agreed.
It's just like, and by the way, I'm also sure that probably wasn't the full reason. He was the only one confused. I'm sorry.
Right.
Who's on the sideline?
I'm gonna let you cook, but I'll give you some of the context that he left out.
But the headline, literally, as I see it, all of a sudden come up in my news feed. NickSaban reveals game Bryce Young was, quote, so confused we had no chance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for real, like, it's about to be like his first start, like, of a fresh year where he hopes to like do good things and like have confidence and all this stuff. And now we get this from his former head coach of like, see, even his coach thinks he sucks and gets confused and is an idiot. And it's like, am I naturally defensive of quarterbacks that play for this team that get at times what I think is unfair criticism? Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the Cam Newton effect. Sorry. But at the same time, I'm just like, oh, now really? Like, now he's got to get this quote. But I mean, I don't think it became as big of a news story as I was afraid it would. But still, I just was like, Nick, really?
Yeah.
Come on, man. This is your guy. Like, give him some help. He needs you.
So this made me think about a conversation I had with Paul Feinbaum on the midweek talk through last year. It was after the Dolphins game, because I remember I had Feinbaum on because it was Tua versus Bryce, and I wanted the context of Alabama quarterbacks. I had never considered this was true, but Paul swears this is who Nick Saban is. When you are gone from Alabama, you are kind of out of Nick's mind. It doesn't mean that he is blaming Bryce for this. It's just there's no reason to protect Bryce anymore. He's not my player. Okay? Don't love that, but understand that that is the way Nick has always operated, right? The part of this that I think is not accurate to say he's throwing Bryce under the bus.
No, I
actually let me say this. Let me give you
to walk that back slightly.
Let me give you some context.
Yeah.
Let me give you some context that he left out that actually goes to your point.
Yeah.
Because had he given the proper context, there is no question that he is not putting this on Bryce. First of all, he said that for the first time he won 19 straight games. And then Bryce Young was confused. We came in here and lost.
Right. And I didn't like that wording either. I'm like, He's the only one?
It was clunky because those 19 straight wins, most of them were Mac Jones, not Bryce Young.
Right.
That season was that season they went to A&M and lost was Bryce's first season as the starter.
And it's probably pretty early, I would assume.
Yeah, probably week 4 or 5, I think.
Yeah. And that's not a team you want to play early unless they have Connor Wegman as their quarterback. And then you want to play them all the time.
The other part of it that he left out is that was, that season was the beginning of these last 3 years of Alabama's biggest obstacle is Alabama. The penalties were out of this. That was the first game where like the penalties were overwhelming.
They had so many penalties that year. I remember that.
Yeah.
They were so sloppy compared to what we were used to seeing, for sure.
Right. And it was everything from not getting men off the field in time to false. I mean, it was dumb penalties, right? So
whose fault is that, Nick?
Agreed. So I will say that is definitely
should have been
your
fired.
point. Had he no, listen, after Alabama had to punt on its second possession of the game on Saturday, I immediately tweeted, fire Kalen DeBoer.
Oh my God, stop it.
It's over.
You're so spoiled. Ridiculous.
All right, so all of that, if you have that context, you understand there's no way this is against Bryce Young. Leaving it out does make it feel a little bit
he literally only said Bryce Young.
Right.
So I was like, really?
Right. Here's the
How
part
about our
where
offense? To be fair, was Bryce the entire offense? Yeah. So maybe that's why. But also, like, when coaches speak to that and they're like, it's not all on the quarterback, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you literally just made it all on the quarterback.
See, here's where I don't think he is throwing BryceYoung under the bus.
I think he was just talking. I don't think he did it on purpose. Yeah.
But I think the two things that are important to recognize here. Number one, he's not wrong. Bryce looked really rattled.
I don't doubt that at all.
But number two is exactly what you just said. I think that was more clunky wording of frustration because
and trying to pay compliments to Elko. I get that.
A few weeks earlier, Alabama played Texas, and the only reason Alabama won that game was because BryceYoung decided, I'm going to win this game now.
Right. Like, how many games did he win for you all by himself? And you're going to go call him, oh, he's so confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that there is a little element of NickSaban not being used to having to think about the way he says things in there. I don't think he meant to throw Bryce under the bus. I think that
he probably worries even less now about like what he says about a former player.
The college football bubble bath this week that is going to come out on Friday is about seeing all of the message board genius nonsense of people from Florida and South Carolina saying,
my favorite was the Jimbo one. It was at Florida. Someone said we should look into Jimbo. I laughed until tears flowed down my face.
Listen, everybody so I saw multiple fan bases that say like they are doing the math in their head of here's how we get Nick-Saban. And the whole point is exactly what you said. He gives so little of a shit now about turning a program around or about what he is saying on television.
There's no amount of money. He has all of it. Like, calm down.
Yeah.
Come on. I thought the Jimbo stuff was dumb. That's somehow dumber.
And look, as much as we sort of roll our eyes about the whole like, oh, well, the wife's in charge kind of thing, like, if you follow the Saban, it's pretty clear it was Terry that was done with college football and not Nick.
Maybe Bryce's people should call Terry and say that they weren't very happy.
Well, Terry's the only one that could do something about it.
There you go.
There you go.
I bet Terry wouldn't like that.
No, not at all. I bet he got an earful from Terry.
Good.
At home.
Thank you, Terry. Because please tell him this year, if he ever has a shaky game, please don't go in public and talk about it. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Lauren, as we wrap up the show, we have to ask. We put it off last week. We have to ask now, are we ready to be hurt again? Do you have any level of belief that you are ready to see be dashed?
Well, you know what really sucks about this season, about this, is that you start off week one with a team that I hate.
Yeah.
You know, and
by the way, is that becoming like an annual tradition that they open with New Orleans?
I hate it so much. I hate when because they basically what they end up doing is they end up like starting with them and ending with them.
Right.
And I'm like, I want neither of those. I want them in the middle of the year when they're sleepy.
Yeah.
I don't.
It is always some significance, right? It like last year it was they started with them and then 4 weeks later it was a Monday Night Football game against them.
Yeah.
2 years ago it was starting with them and then comes down to, you know, where they got to be drafting / are the Saints going to make the playoffs kind of moment. Yeah, there's always a weird bookend of significance on it.
The worst part about it too, and people will roll their eyes and say, well, what exactly do you want? I would love to play a middle of the road team. That's what I want. You know what I don't want? A team that ranked last on the athletics optimism scale, below the Carolina Panthers, because you know what that means. There's only now in a season where like the only way to go is up, literally out of the gate. That's not true.
Right.
Almost. It's terrifying. I hate it here.
Yeah.
I don't want it.
Right.
I don't like to watch with the hate in my heart that I have for them. Although I will say it's a little bit, I guess, like Duke without Coach K for Carolina people, I'm sure. Like without Sean Payton, you know, and without Drew Brees, it's not as easy to like despise them to the level, but I still don't like the way their fans are. So
I was about to say, so this is probably a product of growing up down there. But boy, their fans do a lot of that heavy lifting.
They do. So like for me, that does help. But at the same time, like without having to see his stupid face on the sideline constantly, just such a anyway. It does make it a little harder, but still.
Last year when we started this show, I remember telling you I could see the path to this team making the playoffs because the whole NFC South was in a transition year without Tom Brady. Right. It all sucked. There was no like, oh, well, at least that team has Tom Brady. So if everybody's bad, that's your default favorite.
Now the whole NFC South is like Saints suck. Everyone else, Panthers probably suck.
Yeah.
The others maybe suck. Maybe suck less.
Maybe suck less, I think, is as optimistic as you can get about any team in this division.
Atlanta and Tampa. Yeah, I guess.
I feel better about this team this year.
Oh, yeah.
Than I did at the end of last season. That being said, I cannot let myself get there on the people that are saying this is the dark horse playoff team.
No, God, no, shut up. Also, no one asked for this. We don't want this. We just want you to ignore us until we're good. And then we're going to be mad that you don't talk about us all the time. That is how we work. Yeah. Okay. Please ignore us. Do not talk about us if we have any success, like slight success, and be like, ooh, look at the Panthers. No, don't look at the Panthers. Don't look at the Panthers until we're ready for you to look at us. Then you can look at us. You remember every primetime game last year was like a nightmare for me.
Yes,
I was like, for the love of God, please don't put us on television. Don't look at us. Don't.
The Thursday night football game they played, I think the error message, it was against the Bears, right? I think the error message that that Amazon puts up is, we're sorry, we cannot show you this right now.
Yeah, it's a content filter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Amazon, for understanding what we're doing to ourselves.
No, so like okay. Do I have hope in general for this season? Yes. Do I hate everything? Like, hope, by the way, meaning it will be better than last year.
I think I saw a simulation of the season, and granted, this is done on Madden. Take it with a grain of salt, but with everything being adjusted, I think ESPN simulation for this team was 5-12, and that still nets them the number 2 or 3 draft pick, which honestly,
that would be great.
I'd be very happy with that.
If they did, you know what? If they did like win 1 or 2 more, I wouldn't. Usually I do get mad about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you ruin your draft position.
No, listen.
But now I feel like I wouldn't be as mad, because I do think like both BryceYoung, the fans in general, everybody needs to see some proof of concept, right? So
yeah, and that's what I was going to say before, and I'm going to let you answer this big question here at the end. But what I do think is really important is, we all know, whether you're a fan of this team or not, the passing game got a lot of scrutiny last year, and it deserved it.
Yes.
They clearly have improved. Whether it is Bryce, whether it is the weapons, whether it is the O-line, the passing game, I have more faith in now.
Me too.
Than I did at all last season.
I didn't want to see it last year. Literally.
I think you and I have a different, bigger questions. And this sort of circles back to the Ickey conversation. I like what I've seen out of him. I like the additions in the middle of the offensive line.
Yep.
The O-line to me is still the question, because it derailed so much last year.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think it's I hate to do the coach speak of it is what it is, but it kind of is at this point. Is it fixed? No, I wouldn't say that it's fixed, but is it like a tire fire? Also, no. So that's all I was literally asking for last year, is like, please don't be a disaster. Again, not to pick on Ickey, but like, that stat is outrageous. To allow a pressure on literally a third of the snaps that you're on the field is insane, especially like for a rookie quarterback and no weapons. Like, it's just a recipe for exactly the kind of shit that we saw on offense last year. So like, what I want to see is, I said this too, regardless of record, I just want to see improvement in that part of things. I am nervous about the defense on a lot of levels. Okay. Just a lot.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I guess it is because that there is such a glaring this is what it looks like when it all goes wrong, that you have to point to the offensive line last year. But to your point, like, everything that kept that from being the case with the defensive line last year, or pass rush in general, gone now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like they lost some people too, and it's like, and they didn't really replace them, and then they have no depth.
Yeah,
at that. Like, especially at edge, because they also cut somebody. I forget who they cut yesterday, but I was like,
Caleb Chason.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They have someone coming, or because that's the concern, right? And like, look in I will say this, the one thing that gives me a little bit of like, I don't want to say hope, but whatever. Like, if the offense is crappy enough across the field from you, there's a lot of self-check involved there too. So like, I'm not necessarily saying it scares me as much with like the Saints as it would for another offense necessarily, but like, that's what freaks me out when they play some of these, oh God, the Bears. I forgot that was happening. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I have a month to prepare for that. I need every day of that.
Right.
Frankly, because that's the other thing is like, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like long term, I still think that's the bigger concern in terms of like, can this team be a playoff team? They don't have what I would call a playoff caliber offensive line necessarily, but it's also better than last year, so I'll take it. Whereas like defense, I feel like I don't think it's better than last year, certainly, especially up front.
The defense is clearly not as good
and
last year from a talent perspective.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? You mentioned they cut Kayvon Chaisson. Honestly, them bringing in Kayvon Chaisson should have been a sign that something is really wrong. Because
yes, and then to cut him too, though, it's also like, oh, so you're just going in with that's the list?
Right.
That's everybody?
I know I bring up the Jaguars a lot on this show. It's because I did some work with a radio station down in Jacksonville. So I got very familiar with the team over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, the team could not give Chaisson away. And so the fact that they brought him in made me wonder, okay, kid like Evero maybe crack the code here. And the fact that they just so quickly give up on him tells you, oh, there might not have been a plan for the guy all along, or for the pass rush.
They were probably just literally trying it and just like, let's see if this works. Yeah. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Trevin Wallace has certainly proven during the preseason that he is a really nice addition to the draft. But again, he's a rookie. Like, how much can you really bank on him contributing in year one?
I like the tackles a lot.
I do too.
You got to have a pass rush in today's league.
Well, and not only that, like even if you do not get to the quarterback every time, you've got to, you've got to be able to use your pass rush to create disruption,
turnovers,
that your secondary
whatever,
can take advantage of.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't know that we have a secondary that can do that.
No. So that's also a problem. So it's like, oh, your pass rush is bad. Well, your secondary will. Oh, shit.
Right.
And they're like, offense in general in this league is not as good as it used to be. So is that going to be a huge concern every week? No. But will it be a concern when they play a good offense? Yes. And it will cost them games. Like I've seen this movie before with the Panthers in terms of teams like this. That's why I said earlier, in this offseason, like if they can show improvement on offense, the win-loss record won't matter as much to me as just like, because Cam Newton lost a lot of games like in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I was about to say. Like, I think it is very possible that it is going to look a lot like it did last year, but they are going to frustratingly lose games 35-31 as opposed to 11-13.
So if I really want to twist my brain in a pretzel, which obviously I do, since I clearly hate myself enough to watch this team on purpose constantly, and hope for good things for them, it's like, you could say that maybe you're right about the O-line, because what everybody's going to be wanting to see, the NFL narrative machine, the fans, whoever else, is something out of Bryce. And then there's this part of me that's like, like I was having a conversation with my dad, and we were talking about that trade with the Bears. And like for him, I think that's why he's like, it's going to be really hard for Bryce to ever live up to that trade. And that's where DaveTepper screwed him even more, because like to trade all that they traded away to get him, it's like you have to make that really count, and you have to be the type of guy that can carry this team on your shoulders. Bryce is, we understand Bryce was not going to be that guy. DaveTepper screwed up, right? I think we know that. But at this point now, moving forward, you just have to show fans and whoever else, the narrative machine, right, that it was still okay. They still have their guy. Yeah. And that's what this year is going to be about to me. And if the O-line's not good enough, then it's going to be hard.
Right.
Oh God, I don't want to lose to the Saints.